Good evening. Yes, so I'm here to review a 50-year-old film, which seems quite ridiculous, even by my standards. I'm not in the cinema car park, I'm on my own drive. And the reason being was because I'd gone out to the cinema this evening and I needed to get back for the dog. So Eva's now inside with Pickle, and I am free to talk about The Exorcist, the director's cut. Now, I love this film, and I know that might sound odd, but it genuinely is one of my favourite films ever. I do think it's a masterpiece. And part of the reason why I think I love it so much is because I had such a positive experience the first time I ever saw it. If you're a true film fan, you will probably already know that the original film was banned in the UK until 1998. So prior to that, the only way to see The Exorcist was if your mum's, nan's, next door neighbour's cousin had like a dodgy pirate copy of it. And thankfully, I didn't ever see it that way. I got to go to the cinema in 1998 with 3 of my mates for an all-night 4-movie horror extravaganza. We watched Halloween H20, which was new that year, because obviously 98, 78, Halloween 20th anniversary. Then the original Nightmare on Elm Street. It's not aged well. It's enjoyable, but it's quite silly. And then finally The Exorcist, and then some total B-movie nonsense was the last one, and we just went home. But when I saw The Exorcist for the first time, it was probably about like midnight. And I was in the old Odeon, Pilgrim Street in Newcastle. Uncomfortable, but beautiful. The big old 1,200-seater. And the screen was just full of, like, proper horror fans. You know, these people had paid £8 to see 4 films overnight. People were dressed up. It was a really, really good atmosphere. I would have been 16 at the time, so quite how I got in, I don't know. But I loved it. I remember as it started, like the anticipation of like this film's been banned for so long, we're finally going to get to see it. And the audience was proper horror fans. Like I say, there was a real sort of like reverie, where like, oh my God, we're actually going to see The Exorcist. And I loved it, and it terrified me. And I think it's brilliant. And tonight I went to see the 50th anniversary director's cut. And I loved it all over again. I know to modern audiences, like my niece is 17, she absolutely loves horror films, but she likes a particular kind of horror film. I'm not saying that is rubbish ones, but your 17-year-old horror fans, your 16-year-old horror fans, not all of them, but most of them don't want, you know, sort of long, moody, quite cerebral horror films, and that's what The Exorcist is. Like, it's about so much more than the shocks and the famous scenes of, well, I'll get to that. But I love this film so much because I think it's perfection. And I thought going in, I didn't know the original well enough to spot the director's cut scenes, but having read about it since I came out of the cinema a little while ago, I did actually ping all the bits that were different. I mean, the most obvious one was the classic spider walk. But I just want to talk a little bit about why I love this film so much and why I do think it's an absolute masterpiece. First of all, the book it's based on by The Exorcist, same title, by William Peter Blatty, is a great book. And I know this because I've read it. He adapted his own book for the screen, which is always a good thing most of the time because it's your material and you love it and you're the best person to cut bits out of it if they need to be cut out of it to make it work for the screen. So it's a great script. Next up, your cast. Everybody's brilliant. Like, Ellen Burstyn as Chris MacNeil, it just conveys so much. She's this movie star, you know, single mum, separated from her husband, Reagan's dad. She's quite classy. She has these sort of bougie parties. She gets out of bed at the beginning in the best looking like 70s pyjamas I've ever seen in my life. But what struck me watching it tonight was watching her and her performance is so good. But watching her, thinking about it now, how I would feel as a mother. Funnily enough, when I saw it when I was 16, I wasn't a mum, and I am now. Reagan in the film's supposed to be 12. My daughter's nearly 15, and then I've got an 11-year-old son, and I started to think, like, what would I do? And you see her turn to science and medicine, and then you see her get desperate and turn to priesthood, priests, because she doesn't know what else to do, because our baby, a little girl, is transformed into this monster, and no one can give her any answers. And just the frustration and the rage, and just there's so much going on, and she's just so compelling. And you can see, like, in her face, she's just like begging for help, even when she's not using those words. Just everything about her demeanor says, I don't know what to do. I want to help my child, and I don't know how. So she's great. Linda Blair as Regan McNeil is very good. I'd forgotten. You tend to think, when you think of The Exorcist, of course, you think of her puking and her head spinning and all that jazz and shouting obscenities. But actually, you forget, like, when you first see her in the film, she is adorable. Like, she is so cute. The blonde pigtails and the sort of perfect straight teeth, and she's all smiley and rosy cheeked, and she loves her mum, and she likes crafts, and she's just like sweetness. She's so adorable. So when she starts to, descend into possession or a breakdown, it's really hard to watch, and I think Linda Blair did such a good job. Obviously I know all the backstory, so I know that sometimes it was another actress, and obviously I know the voice, the demon's voice was another actress again, but she still went through a lot to make that film as a child, and famously being thrown about on the bed. But they were doing it, and it was genuinely hurting us. They had to make a brace for our back. But the scene where our bedroom's freezing, so the whole crew have got like massive puffer jackets on, and she's lying there in her pajamas, because in the 70s, you wanted the room to look cold. You just had to make it cold. Whereas now, we would just, like I'm a filmmaker, but you just add breath in digitally. You wouldn't worry about it, but yeah, William Friedkin, who I haven't even mentioned yet, the amazing director of The Exorcist, just went, we'll just refrigerate the set. I'll have a 12-year-old lying there in pajamas, freezing. So she does go through a lot in this film, and she's very, very good. I've forgotten the name of the guy who plays Father Karras. I'm sure it's Jason something, but his surname escapes me. He's really good. You're watching a man deal with like a crisis of faith. The fact that he is both a priest and a psychiatrist, but that he became a priest first and they paid for him to study. So he's caught between like logic and science and an understanding of mental illness and all that sort of stuff versus the church, which he's devoted his life to. You've got the subplot about his guilt over his mother dying. So that's all going on in the background. You see him running, you see him boxing, and he, in so many ways, doesn't look like a priest. But, it's the life he's chosen. And so he's superb. Like, nobody in this film turns in a bad performance. I think that's what it boils down to. Everybody's really good. What else did I want to say about it? So in terms of the director's cut stuff, the infamous spider walk scene, which I'd seen sort of deleted scenes, rough cut of, but this was touched up using a bit of CGI. So you quite early on, after Regan started to act up, shall we say, Chris is in the kitchen, the mum's in the kitchen with Sharon, who's a sort of assistant, and they just hear this sort of tap, 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 and when they turn round, Regan is on the stairs. She gets to the bottom of the stairs, she just vomits blood, and it is quite shocking. So yeah, I enjoyed the extra scenes. It is long, and like nothing happens with Regan until you're like half an hour, 45 minutes in. But I love that about it. It's so 70s, obviously. There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of pondering, there's a lot of questions raised about faith and duty and all this sort of stuff, and what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a son or a daughter. Like, there's so much going on in this film, aside from a girl, you know, molesting herself with a crucifix. And, you know, the scary bits are scary, and the makeup is superb, and all of that sort of stuff. But, and I know, obviously, 50 years on, sometimes those scenes have been parodied. You know, people snigger because you've got a 12-year-old girl saying, well, you know, all sorts of things. But it always makes me uncomfortable. It always makes me like, it's so shocking to hear. And even having seen it before, I don't feel any less shocked by it, because it's horrible. You know, and it is a masterpiece. The music's well done. You know, it's the style of it. I love 70s horror. I absolutely love 70s horror. The Exorcist, The Omen, the original Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, they're all quite different 70s horror films. I think The Omen and The Exorcist are quite obvious bedfellows. But yeah, just the intensity of them, the fact that the effects they had to do for realsies because they didn't have the option to just do everything digitally. And I know from watching Mark Kermode's outstanding documentary, The Fear of God, 25 years of The Exorcist, I believe. So that documentary is now 25 years old. But I know about Ellen Burstyn getting pulled backwards and hurting herself, but he left that take in. I know that when Reagan projectile pukes onto Father Karras, it was supposed to hit his chest, and they angled the projectile differently so it hits him in the face and he looks genuinely angry, and again they left that take in. The last thing I'll say about it is the performance of Max von Sydow. Now, I forgot to look up how old he was, but he was not old. He was quite a young man, and quite why they decided to cast a young man and then make him look old, I don't know. But he is absolutely perfect for the part he plays Father Merrin, who leads the exorcism with Karras assisting. He's so good. And the makeup on him is incredible. Like, many, many, many years later, he was in Minority Report with Tom Cruise, when he actually was an old man, and you just look at him and go, oh yeah, he looks exactly like he did in The Exorcist. So they did a really good job of predicting how he would age. Like, there's no join. I'm looking at it going, that makeup was done in the mid-70s and it just looks excellent. Everything about it is just superb. I love it. I love it for all the questions it raises. I love it for how shocking it is, the makeup effects, the performances, just this inherent 70s-ness of it. It's wonderful. That's absolutely the wrong word to use to describe The Exorcist, but it's just such a bloody good film. And I'm really glad I got to go and see it tonight. So yeah, cheers to that. 50 years of one of the best horror films ever made.